I spent 12 years building the logistical backbone of this company, only to be told I lacked leadership while they promoted a trainee I'd taught from scratch. Insulted, I decided to work exactly to my job description. No overtime, no emergency fixes, no unofficial oversight. 2 months later, the supply chain collapsed, and they realized who actually ran the show. The invite for the meeting had popped up on my calendar at 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was simply titled Q3 Performance and Structural Review. In the world of global logistics, vague titles usually meant one of two things: you were getting fired, or you were getting the promotion you had been bleeding for. Considering I was the only person in the building who knew how to manually override the automated routing system during a server blackout, I assumed it was the latter. I was wrong. At 2:00 p.m. sharp, I walked into Adam Mitchell's office. The room smelled of expensive cologne and stale espresso. Adam, our vice president of operations, sat behind a glass desk that looked like it cost more than my first car. He didn't look up immediately. He was typing something on his phone, letting me stand there for a solid 30 seconds, a classic power move I'd seen him pull on vendors a dozen times. "Colin, sit," he said, finally locking his phone and sliding it face down. I sat. I was 47 years old, wearing a suit that was sensible rather than stylish. I had a notepad on my knee, prepared to take notes on my new responsibilities as director of logistics. "We've reviewed the metrics," Adam started, leaning back in his ergonomic mesh chair. "Your department's throughput is excellent. 99.8% on-time delivery rate for the Northeast sector. It's impressive work, Colin." "It really is." "Thank you, Adam," I said, my voice steady. "I've been refining the node weighting algorithms for the last 6 months. It's finally running smooth." "Right. The algorithms," he said, waving a hand dismissively as if I were talking about changing a light bulb. "That's the thing, Colin. You're a technician, a mechanic of the process, and we value that. But the director role, that requires vision. It requires leadership." My stomach tightened. I knew that word. It was the corporate shield used to deflect merit. "I've managed the night shift team for 5 years," I countered, keeping my tone respectful. "I've trained the last 3 regional managers. I trained you on the legacy database when you first started, Adam." Adam's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And we appreciate that. But leadership isn't about knowing which buttons to push. It's about energy, optics. We need someone who can disrupt the status quo, not just maintain it. We need a change agent." He paused for dramatic effect. "We're promoting Georgia Gomez to the director position, effective Monday." The silence that filled the room was heavy enough to crush bone. Georgia? She had been in the department for 18 months. I had spent the last 6 weeks fixing her routing errors because she kept confusing gross weight with volumetric weight on international manifests. "Georgia," I repeated, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "Adam, with all due respect, Georgia deleted the master vendor list twice last month. I had to restore it from a backup I keep on my personal drive." Adam sighed, looking at me with distinct pity. "See, that's exactly what I mean, Colin. You're focused on the weeds. Georgia is focused on the canopy. She has executive presence. The board loves her presentation on synergistic routing. Well, you're very good at the background stuff." He stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. "You'll report to her starting next week. I expect you to support her fully during the transition. Teach her the nuts and bolts so she can focus on the big picture." I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my chest where my loyalty used to be. "Of course," I said. "I'll give her exactly the support she needs." "Great," Adam beamed, mistaking my resignation for submission. "That's the team spirit. Oh, and Colin, try to smile more in meetings. It affects the culture." I walked out of that glass office, the hum of the air conditioning sounding like a distant roar. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I went back to my desk, sat down, and looked at the 3 monitors that controlled the flow of millions of dollars of inventory. Adam wanted me to focus on the nuts and bolts. He had no idea that I was the nuts and bolts, and he had just stripped the thread. The following Monday morning, the atmosphere in the logistics bit had shifted. Georgia Gomez had moved into the glass-walled office adjacent to Adam's. She had already replaced the whiteboard full of critical shipping routes with a series of motivational posters. One of them featured a soaring eagle with the word "D's Rooped" in bold Helvetica font. At 9:00 a.m., I was summoned for our first alignment session. Georgia was sitting on the edge of her desk holding a latte. She was 32, ambitious, and fluent in corporate buzzwords. She looked at me over the rim of her cup, her eyes bright with the thrill of unearned authority. "Colin, come in," she chirped. "Adam told me you're going to help me get up to speed on the technical side. I want to knock this out quickly so we can focus on strategy." "Strategy is important," I said, taking a seat. "But first, we need to review the morning protocol. The server sync happens at 4:00 a.m. If the Shanghai node doesn't handshake with the LA hub by 4:15, you have to manually override the port blockage codes. Otherwise, we lose about 40 containers a day to customs holds." I placed a thick binder on her desk. It was my manual. The manual. 12 years of error codes, workarounds, and contact numbers for the only 3 guys at the port of Long Beach who would answer a phone at 3:00 a.m. Georgia looked at the binder like I had placed a dead fish on her desk. "Colin, wow," she laughed nervously. "This is a lot of paper. We're trying to move to a paperless ecosystem. Can't you just email me the bullet points?" "It's not really bullet point material, Georgia," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "The legacy system is fragile. It requires specific syntax. If you enter the date format as DD/MM instead of MM/DD on the manifest, the system rejects the entire shipment. It cost the company $10,000 in late fees per incident." She waved her hand, mimicking Adam's gesture from the week before. "We'll update the software eventually. I'm bringing in a vendor next month to look at AI solutions. For now, just handle the technical glitches for me, okay? I need to prepare for the regional budget meeting. I want to show Adam I can cut costs by 15%. I stared at her. "You want to cut costs? The only reason our costs are low is because I spend 2 hours every night manually rerouting trucks to avoid surge pricing zones. That's not automated, Georgia. That's me." She checked her Apple Watch. Right, and we value that. But part of my new directive is to delegate. So, you keep doing that routing thing. I'm going to focus on vendor relationships. I have a lunch with the plastic suppliers in an hour. She stood up, signaling dismissal. "Just keep the lights on, Colin. I'm the captain now, but every ship needs a good engineer in the engine room, right?" "Right," I said. I picked up my binder. "Leave the binder," she said. "I'll scan it later, or have my assistant do it." I hesitated, then set the binder back down. It didn't matter. She wouldn't read it. She didn't understand that the engine room wasn't just machinery. It was a complex web of dependencies that I held together with sheer force of will and a proprietary script running on my local machinist script nobody else knew existed. "One last thing," I said, pausing at the door. "The routing script. It requires a manual refresh every Friday at 5:00 p.m. If you don't refresh the token, the API connection to the trucking fleet severs." She was already typing an email. "Refresh the token." "Got it. Thanks, Colin." She hadn't written it down. I walked back to my cubicle. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I looked at the sea of heads analysts, dispatchers, junior coordinators, all working diligently, unaware that the person at the helm was steering towards an iceberg because she liked the view better from the bridge. I sat down and opened my email. There was a notification from HR. Updated job description for Senior Logistics Coordinator. I clicked it open. I wanted to see exactly what they expected of me. Not what they thought I did, but what was written in ink. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a printout of my contract and a mug of black coffee. The apartment was quiet. I lived alone. My divorce was 5 years in the rearview mirror, a casualty of the 60-hour weeks I had poured into a company that just told me I wasn't leadership material. I took a red pen and began to read. Role: Senior Logistics Coordinator, primary duties: monitor daily shipment logs, generate weekly variance reports, liaise with warehouse supervisors regarding inventory levels, update safety compliance documentation. I read it again, then a third time. Nowhere did it say manage the proprietary routing algorithm. Nowhere did it say train the director of operations. Nowhere did it say respond to emergency customs alerts at 2:00 a.m. Nowhere did it say manually re-optimize the fleet distribution to save 15% on fuel costs. I had been doing those things for a decade because I took pride in my work. Because I thought it was my department. Because I thought if I built the throne, eventually they'd let me sit in it. Instead, they put a jester on it and told me to polish the legs. I picked up my phone. It was 8:45 p.m. Usually, right now, I would log into the secure server from my home VPN. I would check the orphan package of shipments that had lost their tracking tags due to system glitches and manually reconnect them. It took about 45 minutes every night. If I didn't do it, those packages would sit in the distribution center in Ohio for 3 weeks until a customer complained. My thumb hovered over the VPN app. Leadership, I whispered to the empty room. They want leadership. I thought about Adam's arrogant smile. I thought about Georgia dismissing my binder. The irony was, true leadership involves protecting your team and your resources. But they didn't want that. They wanted optics. They wanted me to stay in my lane. So I decided to do exactly that. I deleted the VPN app from my phone. Then I opened my laptop. I navigated to the folder labeled Vance DH2LS. Inside was a Python script I had written 3 years ago. It was a beautiful piece of code that scraped traffic data, weather patterns, and driver legal hours to optimize our routes. I ran it locally on my machine, and it fed the results into the company's main database. The company didn't own the script. They didn't even know it was a script. They just thought the system was smart. They thought the system magically knew to avoid I-95 during construction season. I right-clicked on the scheduled task that ran the script automatically every morning at 6:00 a.m. Select Action Disable. A small dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to disable this task? I took a sip of coffee. It was lukewarm, but it tasted better than the champagne they were probably drinking at the executive happy hour right now. I'm just focusing on the nuts and bolts, I said aloud. I clicked yes. The task status changed from ready to disabled. I closed the laptop. For the first time in 12 years, I was going to sleep a full 8 hours. I wasn't quitting. I wasn't sabotage. I was simply reverting to the factory settings of my employment contract. Malicious compliance is a slow poison. You don't see the effects immediately. It takes time for the rot to set in, for the unmaintained machinery to rust, for the cracks in the foundation to widen. But I knew the math. I gave it 3 weeks before the first major alarm went off. I was wrong. It only took 4 days. The silence on the operations floor broke exactly 72 hours after I disabled the script. It started with a low murmur near the dispatch desks at 10:14 a.m. on Thursday. Then, the murmur grew into the distinct, frantic clicking of keyboards. Finally, it erupted into shouting. Why is the status still pending? The truck has been at the gate for 4 hours, someone yelled. I didn't look up. I was busy filling out the weekly variance report, a tedious Excel spreadsheet that required me to manually input the tire pressure logs for our fleet. It was busy work, the kind of task they gave to people they wanted to keep quiet. I was typing in 32 PSI for the 50th time when my desk phone rang. It was Georgia. Colin, can you come to my office? Now. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. I saved my spreadsheet, locked my screen, and walked slowly toward the glass fishbowl. Inside, Georgia was standing behind her desk, gripping her hair. On her wall of monitors, the map of the eastern seaboard was lit up with flashing red icons. What is happening? She demanded the moment I stepped inside. The obsession with the Philadelphia hub nothing is moving. The drivers are saying the gate codes are invalid. We have 48 trucks idling on the asphalt, burning diesel. I looked at the screen. I knew exactly what was happening. My script usually auto-generated new gate codes every 6 hours and pushed them to the driver's handheld devices via a secure API. Without the script, the codes had expired at midnight. The system had defaulted to lockdown mode for security. It looks like a synchronization error, I said calmly, clasping my hands behind my back. Well, fix it, she snapped, pointing at the screen. Just do the override thing you do. I can't, I said. She froze. What do you mean you can't? I don't have authorization, I replied, keeping my voice level. When my role was restructured to Senior Logistics Coordinator, my admin privileges for the security mainframe were revoked. Remember? Adam said he wanted to streamline access to leadership only to prevent data leaks. It was true, a minor detail in the HR paperwork that Adam had likely skimmed over. They had removed my root access to protect the asset, not realizing I was the only one who knew how to drive it. That's ridiculous, Georgia sputtered. I'll give you my password. I can't accept that, Georgia, I said, channeling the most bureaucratic tone I could muster. Sharing executive credentials is a Class A violation of the IT security policy. If I log in as you and something goes wrong, I could be terminated for cause. I can't take that risk. Her eyes widened. She looked at the red lights blinking on the screen. Each blink represented a delayed shipment. The client for that specific hub was TechSource, our biggest electronics account. They had a penalty clause, $500 for every hour a shipment was late. Then tell me what to do, she pleaded, her arrogance evaporating into sheer panic. You need to manually reset the gate tokens, I explained. Log into the server, open the command line interface, navigate to the usre sr/bin/security directory, and execute the keygen reset command. Then you have to manually copy the new hex code to each driver's profile. Command line? She blinked. Like coding? I don't know how to do that. I thought there was a button. There is no button, I said. There never was. She stared at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to sigh, sit in her chair, and save the day like I always did. I watched the clock on the wall. 10:22 a.m. Every minute was costing the company money. I have to get back to my variance report, I said. The deadline is noon, and Adam was very clear about prioritizing my assigned duties. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard her slamming the phone receiver against the desk, screaming for IT support. I knew IT support wouldn't help her. The ticket would go to a Tier 1 technician in Bangalore who would ask her if she had tried restarting the router. I sat back down at my desk and typed 32 psi. By Friday afternoon, the atmosphere in the office was toxic. The air conditioner was working overtime, but the room felt hot, heavy with the sweat of 20 stressed-out dispatchers. The Philadelphia blockage had eventually been cleared, but it had taken 14 hours. Georgia had forced a junior IT guy to hack a workaround, but because they didn't understand the load balancing, they had inadvertently routed all the traffic to a secondary gate that only had one guard. The bottleneck was catastrophic. I was ignored. Completely. It was as if I had become a ghost. The junior managers were running around with headsets, shouting at drivers, trying to put out fires that were popping up everywhere. Where's the invoice for the manifest? Number 8839. A young logistics planner named Sarah asked, stopping at my cubicle. She looked exhausted. Colin, the system says no value for the destination. Do you know where this pallet goes? I looked at her. I liked Sarah. She was a good kid, hardworking. It pained me to see her struggling, but I had to hold the line. Did you submit a support ticket? I asked. No, I need to know right now. The truck is leaving. I can't touch the live database without a ticket number, Sarah, I said gently. Protocol. If I edit a live manifest without a ticket, it messes up the audit trail. Georgia was very specific about audit compliance in the memo on Tuesday. But Georgia is in a meeting with the client. She's not answering. Then you have to wait, I said, or guess. Sarah looked at me, confused. You always used to just fix it. I know, I said, and look where that got me. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She walked away. The radio silence strategy was brutal. My inbox was filling up with frantic emails from regional supervisors. Urgent route optimization failed. System error 404. Where are the fuel reports? I deleted them all. Or rather, I moved them to a folder labeled Not My Job Description. At 3:00 p.m., Adam Mitchell walked onto the floor. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing his blazer, which meant he had been dealing with clients. He marched straight to George's office. Through the glass, I saw him gesturing wildly. He pointed at the map, then at the phone. Georgia was shrinking in her chair, looking small and defeated. Adam came out 5 minutes later. He scanned the room, his eyes locking on me. For a second, I thought he was going to come over. I thought he was going to ask me to step in. I met his gaze, my face a mask of polite indifference. He looked away. He couldn't do it. His ego wouldn't let him admit that the maintenance guy was the only one who could fly the plane. He stormed back to his office. I checked the dashboard on my second monitor, the one I kept turned away from the aisle. Weekly efficiency rating. Last week 98.4%, current 83.2%, a 15% drop in 4 days. And the weekend was coming. Weekends were when the automated scripts did the heavy lifting, scheduling, maintenance, preloading Monday's routes, balancing the ledger. This weekend, none of that would happen. I packed my bag at 5:00 p.m. sharp. As I walked to the elevator, I heard Georgia on the phone, her voice cracking. I promise, Mr. Kowalski, it's just a temporary glitch. We're upgrading our systems to serve you better. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. Going down, I whispered. The diner was called the Rusty Anchor. It was 40 minutes away from the office, a dive bar with sticky tables and the best burgers in the state. It was also where Peter Cole did business. Peter was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a dark beer. He was a large man, bearded, wearing a hoodie that hid the fact that he was one of the sharpest forensic accountants in the city. I'd hired him 5 years ago as a systems admin. Adam Mitchell had fired him 6 months later for attitude problems, which actually meant Peter had refused to install spyware on employees' laptops. I slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't say hello. He just slid a thick manila envelope across the table. I dug into the employment contract you sent me, Peter said, his voice a low rumble. And the IP clauses. And, I asked, signaling the waitress for coffee. It's sloppy, Colin. Embarrassingly sloppy. Peter grinned, showing teeth. Standard corporate boilerplate. It says that any inventions or creations made during work hours using company equipment for the express purpose of assigned duties belong to the company. Right, I said. That's what I was worried about. However, Peter continued, tapping the envelope, you told me you wrote the Vance Doc Tools script at home on your personal MacBook? Every line, I confirmed, nights and weekends. I brought it in on a flash drive. I never installed it on the server root. It runs as a localized executable from my user profile. And your job description, I brought that too. I handed him the red-marked paper. Nowhere does it say software development or system architecture. I'm a coordinator. Peter chuckled. It was a dark, satisfied sound. Then you're golden. They don't own the script, Colin. They've been using unlicensed software for 3 years. Software that you, a private developer, kindly allowed them to use pro bono, until now. So, what's the play? I asked. Peter pulled a document out of the envelope. It was a formal invoice. At the top, it read, Vance Logist Solutions, LLC. I registered the LLC for you this morning, Peter said. This is an invoice for retroactive licensing and maintenance fees for the usage of the proprietary optimization algorithm. I set the rate at industry standard for enterprise software. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. My eyebrows shot up. 250,000? That's just for the last 3 years, Peter said, taking a sip of his beer. Going forward, if they want to keep using it, we draft a service-level agreement. Monthly retainer. Expensive. They'll never pay this, I said. Adam will laugh in my face. Let him laugh, Peter said, because on Monday, you're going to formally notify them that you are revoking the license due to non-payment. You're going to delete the script from your work computer. I already disabled it. Good. But on Monday, you delete the source code. You scrub it. If they want it back, they have to buy it from Vance Logistics Solutions. Peter leaned forward, his eyes intense. They humiliated you, Colin. They took your work, slapped a director title on an incompetent amateur, and told you to smile. This isn't just about money. It's about showing them that the engine doesn't run without the spark. I looked at the invoice. I thought about the way Georgia had dismissed my binder. I thought about the soaring eagle poster that said disrupt. I picked up the pen Peter offered me. You're right, I said. They want disruption? Let's give them disruption. I signed the document. One more thing, Peter said, stowing the papers away. When the crash happens, and it will happen, they are going to try to blame you. They'll say you sabotaged the system. That's where I come in. How? I've already started archiving their public operational data. The drop in efficiency, the late shipments, the client complaints. I'm building a timeline that proves the failure started the moment management took over. If they try to sue you, we countersue for defamation and hostile workplace environment, and I have the logs to prove it. We shook hands. His grip was iron. To the nuts and bolts, Peter said, raising his glass. To the nuts and bolts, I replied, clicking my coffee mug against his glass. Outside, the wind was picking up. A storm was coming, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the rain. I was the one bringing the flood. The mid-month operations review was usually a victory lap. In the past, I would sit in the back row while Adam took credit for the green arrows on the projector screen, nodding along as he explained how his vision had improved efficiency by 0.5%. This time, the arrows were red. Deep, arterial red. It was a Wednesday, 3 weeks after I had disabled the script. The conference room was packed. The regional directors were there, looking grim. Georgia sat at the head of the table next to Adam, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Her blazer was wrinkled, and she was aggressively clicking a pen. Adam stood up, adjusting his cuffs. He looked tired, but his arrogance was still intact, shielded by a layer of corporate denial. As you can see, Adam began, using a laser pointer to circle a cliff-like drop on the graph. We encountered some significant headwinds this month. Market volatility in the fuel sector, combined with unexpected port congestion on the West Coast, has impacted our throughput. I sat in the corner, my notebook open, my face blank. Market volatility, that was a lie. Fuel prices had stabilized 2 weeks ago. Port congestion, another lie. The Port of Long Beach was operating at record speed. The real reason for the drop was sitting on my hard drive, disabled. Without the script balancing the load, the trucks were driving empty half the time. We were paying for deadhead miles drivers, returning with empty trailers because no one had calculated the backhaul. Current production is down 35%, Adam admitted, his voice tight. But we are confident this is transitional friction. Georgia has implemented a new manual tracking system that is showing promise. A regional director from Ohio, a gruff man named Henderson, spoke up. Adam, promise doesn't pay my drivers. My guys are sitting in Cleveland waiting for routing numbers for 6 hours. They're threatening to unionize. We haven't missed numbers like this since 2008. What changed? Adam stiffened. We are modernizing our stack, Henderson. These are growing pains. We are moving away from legacy dependencies. He glanced at me. Just for a second, it was an accusatory look, daring me to speak. I didn't. I just wrote in my notebook, Day 21, deadhead mileage up 200%. Overtime, costs up 40%. Colin, Henderson turned to me. You've been quiet. You usually have the fix for this. Why are the routing tables not syncing? The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. Georgia stopped clicking her pen. I looked up slowly. I'm afraid that's outside my current purview, Mr. Henderson. As Senior Logistics Coordinator, I focus on the daily variance reports and safety compliance. The routing strategy is now under the Director's jurisdiction. I gestured politely to Georgia. Georgia flushed. We're auditing the sync issues. It's a vendor problem. A vendor problem, Henderson scoffed. We own the damn trucks. We'll have it fixed by Q4, Adam interjected quickly, cutting off the bleeding. Let's move to the budget. The meeting dragged on for another hour. I watched them rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. They were talking about cutting the coffee budget to save money, while the ship was taking on $1 million of water in the hold. When the meeting adjourned, Adam cornered me by the door. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He hissed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Enjoying what, Adam? I asked innocently. The glitches. You think I don't know? You're slow-walking the support. I'm following the protocol you wrote, I said, meeting his eyes. I'm prioritizing my assigned duties. Unless you want to authorize overtime for me to investigate system architecture, that would require renegotiation of my role. Adam stared at me, his jaw working. He wanted to scream. He wanted to fire me, but he couldn't. I was the only one submitting the safety reports that kept the feds off our backs. Just get back to work, he muttered. Yes, sir, I said. I have a lot of tire pressure logs to input. The breakdown of authority is a loud process. It doesn't happen in emails, it happens in the hallway. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. The office was vibrating with tension. The weekend rush, the critical window to get freight moving before the Saturday cutoff, was collapsing. Georgia was standing in the middle of the operations pit, holding a telephone handset with a cord that stretched back to a desk. She was shouting, I don't care what the driver said, tell him to take the load, she screamed. The entire floor stopped working to watch. He can't, Georgia, Sarah, the young planner, said, her voice shaking. He's out of legal hours. If he drives, he loses his license. The system should have flagged this yesterday. Well, override it, Georgia yelled. Just put it under a different driver code. That's illegal, Sarah whispered. That's federal fraud. Georgia looked around wild-eyed. She was sweating. Her hair was coming undone. The disruptor, the change agent, was currently trying to coerce a 24-year-old employee to commit a felony because she didn't understand how to manage a shift change. I need solutions, not excuses. Georgia slammed the phone down. It missed the cradle and clattered onto the floor. She spun around and saw me. I was standing by the printer, collecting my nicely collated safety reports. You, she marched over to me, pointing a finger in my face. You did this. You changed the settings. I haven't touched the settings in a month, Georgia, I said calmly. I don't have access, remember? Don't give me that. The routing algorithm, it's gone. It's just gone. The computer is just giving us raw data. It's not sorting anything. She was close to tears. The stress had stripped away the MBA polish, leaving a frightened amateur who had bitten off way more than she could chew. The algorithm? I asked, feigning confusion. You mean the manual process I used to run? The one I offered to teach you, but you said you wanted to focus on big picture strategy? Fix it, she hissed. I'm ordering you. Fix it right now. I can't fix what isn't broken, I said. The system is doing exactly what the software purchased by this company is designed to do. It's just not doing what my personal tools did. What tools? The ones I took home, I said simply, because they weren't company property. She froze. You took the code? I took my personal intellectual property as per my exit from the director track role. I'm going to HR, she threatened, though her voice wavered. I'm gonna tell Adam you stole company assets. Go ahead, I said. But ask yourself this, Georgia. If you report that the entire department collapsed because a low-level coordinator took his laptop home, what does that say about your leadership? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was trapped. If she admitted I was essential, she admitted she was incompetent. If she didn't admit it, the failure continued. I hate you, she whispered. I know, I said. That hatred doesn't move freight. I walked back to my desk. 10 minutes later, I saw Georgia run into the bathroom. She didn't come out for 40 minutes. The floor managers started making their own decisions, bypassing her entirely. The hierarchy had dissolved. It was anarchy, and the numbers kept dropping. The death blow arrived on the second Tuesday of the second month. I arrived at work to find the parking lot strangely empty of delivery vans. Usually, at 8:00 a.m., the loading docks were a symphony of slamming doors and reversing alarms. Today it was silent. I swiped my badge and walked in. The mood was funeral. Adam's office door was open. He was sitting at his desk, head in his hands. Georgia was nowhere to be seen. I sat at my desk and unlocked my computer. My inbox pinged. A company-wide email. Subject: Urgent Town Hall 10:00 a.m. I knew what it was. At 9:55 a.m., the rumor mill confirmed it. TechSource had pulled the contract. TechSource was 60% of our outbound volume. They had cited chronic unreliability, missed delivery windows, and lack of data transparency. They had invoked the penalty clause and moved their business to our biggest competitor, Apex Logistics. Apex Logistics used a standard software suite. They weren't special, but they were competent. And right now, competence beat disruption. We gathered in the main atrium. The CEO, Mr. Sterling, a man I had only seen twice in 12 years, was there. He looked furious. He was standing on a makeshift stage flanked by Adam. Adam looked like a ghost. He was pale, sweating. He kept checking his phone, praying for a miracle that wasn't coming. This morning, Sterling began, his voice echoing off the glass walls. We received notice of termination from our primary partner. Production volume has dropped 70% in 60 days. We are hemorrhaging cash. The silence was terrifying. People were looking at their shoes. They were thinking about mortgages, tuitions, car payments. I felt a twinge of guilt for them, the innocent bystanders. But I reminded myself that I had tried to save them. I had offered to train Georgia. I had tried to do the job. Adam was the one who steered the ship into the rocks. We are launching an immediate internal investigation, Sterling continued. We need to understand how a department that was best in class 3 months ago became a liability. Sterling turned to Adam. Mr. Mitchell will be leading the recovery team. It was a lie. You could see it in Sterling's eyes. He wasn't letting Adam lead anything. He was letting Adam stand there to take the bullets until they found a replacement. After the speech, the crowd dispersed in a murmur of fear. I went back to my desk. My phone rang. It was Adam. My office, he croaked. I walked in. Adam didn't ask me to sit. He was standing by the window, looking out at the empty loading dock. Fix it, he said. He didn't sound arrogant anymore. He sounded desperate. I don't care what it takes. Fix the routing. Get the numbers up. If we show a 10% bump by Friday, maybe we can salvage the account. I can't do that, Adam, I said. He spun around. Don't give me that job description crap. The company's dying, Colin. Do you want everyone to lose their jobs? No, I said. But I can't fix it because I don't have the tools. The system you have installed is the system you paid for. The system that actually worked. That was a custom build by me. And I deleted it. You what? I deleted it. It was my property. I removed it from the premises. Adam stared at me, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. That is sabotage. I'll have you arrested. No, you won't, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, because Peter Cole has already sent a copy of the licensing agreement to your legal department, along with an invoice. I placed the document on his desk. You've been using my software for 3 years, Adam. I just want to be paid for it, and if you want to turn it back on, we need to talk about a new contract. Adam looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. The realization dawned on him. He hadn't just lost a client. He had lost the war. Get out, he whispered. I'm going to lunch, I said. I'll be at the Rusty Anchor if the board wants to talk. I walked out. The office was quiet. The phones weren't ringing because there were no customers left to call. By 1:00 p.m., my phone had rung 6 times. I ignored every call. I sat in the Rusty Anchor, eating a burger that tasted like victory, while Peter Cole reviewed the final version of the service contract on his tablet. They're panicking, Peter said, glancing at the live analytics on the screen. Their stock price just dipped 4%. The shareholders are seeing the news about the TechSource contract. Let them panic, I said. Panic clarifies priorities. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Adam. It was a number I didn't recognize. A local area code, but the prefix belonged to the executive suites on the top floor. I answered. Mr. Vance, the voice was crisp, authoritative. It was CEO Sterling's executive assistant. Mr. Sterling would like to see you, immediately. In the boardroom. I'm on my lunch break, I said, taking a sip of water. There was a pause. She wasn't used to hearing that. Mr. Vance, the CEO is requesting your presence. This is not optional. Actually, it is, I replied. But tell him I'm willing to come in for a consultation. I'll be there in 30 minutes, and I'm bringing my legal counsel. Your legal counsel? See you soon. I hung up. Peter grinned and closed his tablet. Showtime. When we arrived at the office, the atmosphere had shifted from funeral to frenetic. People were packing boxes. Rumors of layoffs were spreading like wildfire. We walked past the logistics pit. Georgia was sitting at her desk, staring blankly at a screensaver. She looked like a ghost. She didn't even look up as I passed. We took the private elevator to the top floor. The air up here was different, cleaner, cooler, smelling of polished mahogany and old money. We walked into the boardroom. It was a long table surrounded by people who made more in a month than I made in a year. Mr. Sterling sat at the head. Adam Mitchell was there, sitting halfway down the table looking like a man facing a firing squad. There was also the general counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Halloway. Mr. Vance, Sterling said, skipping the pleasantries. And Peter Cole, Peter said, setting his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. Mr. Vance's attorney and business manager. We don't need lawyers, Adam snapped, trying to regain some semblance of control. Colin, we just need you to turn the system back on. We know you did something to the code. Just reverse it and we can discuss disciplinary actions later. I looked at Adam. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, with the ship sinking, he was trying to give orders. I didn't do anything to your system, Adam, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. Your system is running perfectly. It's just stupid. It lacks the logic layer that I provided personally for 3 years. We need that logic layer back, Sterling said, his voice hard. TechSource said they might reconsider the termination if we can demonstrate immediate stability within 48 hours. Can you do that? I can, I said. Good, Sterling nodded. Then get to work. We'll discuss a bonus for your trouble. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Peter interjected. He opened his briefcase and slid 3 thick document binders down the long table. They slid perfectly, stopping right in front of Sterling, Halloway, and Adam. Mr. Vance is no longer acting as an employee in this capacity, Peter stated. The software you require is the intellectual property of Vance Logistics Solutions, LLC. You are currently in violation of copyright law for unauthorized use of the software for the past 36 months. That binder contains the proof of authorship, the timestamps of the code creation, and the invoice for retroactive licensing. Holloway, the general counsel, opened the binder. She scanned the first few pages, her eyes widened slightly. She looked at the IP clause in my employment contract, the one Peter had highlighted, and then at the code timestamps. He wrote this on a personal device, Holloway whispered to Sterling. Outside of company hours. The work-for-hire doctrine doesn't apply if the duties weren't in his job description. And as you can see, I added, sliding my marked-up job description across the table, Adam was very specific about what my duties were, and were not. Adam turned pale. He looked at Holloway, pleading with his eyes for a loophole. She shook her head slightly. He was defenseless. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Sterling read the invoice. $250,000, he asked, looking up at me. For a script? For the engine that drove 40% of your revenue, I corrected. And for the 3 years of maintenance I performed unpaid. This is extortion, Adam blurted out. He's holding the company hostage. It's capitalism, Adam, I said coldly. Supply and demand. I said coldly, supply and demand. I have the supply. You have the demand. And right now your demand is very high. Sterling ignored Adam. He was a businessman. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the stock price on his phone. If we pay this, Sterling asked, can you restore full operational capacity by tomorrow morning? I can have the code running in 10 minutes, I said. I have the executable on a secure cloud drive. I just need to reauthorize the API tokens. Sterling tapped his finger on the table. And going forward, Peter spoke up, the monthly licensing fee is $25,000. That includes remote monitoring and updates. Mr. Vance will not be returning to the office as an employee. He will be an external consultant. That's 3 times his salary. Adam shouted. You can't be serious. Sterling turned to Adam. His face was like granite. Adam, Sterling said quietly, you fired the only person who knew how the business worked. You promoted a novice who cost us our biggest client, and you lied to the board about the recovery timeline. Adam opened his mouth, but no words came out. You're done, Sterling said. Pack your things. Security will escort you out. Adam looked around the room. No one made eye contact. He stood up, his legs shaking, and walked out of the boardroom. He didn't look at me. He looked like a man who had just realized his entire career was built on sand. Sterling turned back to me. He picked up a pen. Ms. Holloway, draft the agreement. We pay the retroactive fee within 24 hours. We sign the consulting retainer. He signed the invoice and slid it back to me. One condition, Mr. Vance, Sterling said. You fix the TechSource account, personally. Consider it done, I said. I signed the paper. My hand didn't shake. 10 minutes later, I walked into the server room escorted by security as a guest. I logged into the terminal. I downloaded the Vance Unster Tools package. I typed in the command sudo python 3 optimize unser core roots.py. I cited zapy and itrates.py statich ente. I hit enter. On the big screens in the operations pit, the red lights flickered. Then, one by one, they turned green. The routing queues cleared. The pending statuses flipped to dispatched. A cheer went up from the floor. The dispatchers didn't know about the meeting. They didn't know about the money. They just knew the nightmare was over. The machine was working again. I watched from the glass walkway above. I saw Georgia packing a box in her office. She was crying. I felt a moment of pity, but it passed quickly. She had chosen to play the game of corporate politics. She just didn't realize she was playing against the person who wrote the rules. 2 weeks later, the office was a different place. Adam was gone. Georgia had been reassigned to a satellite office in Tulsa, demotion in everything but name. The new director of operations was an external hire, a guy named Marcus, who actually asked questions before making changes. I wasn't there to see most of it. I was sitting on my back porch. It was 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was shining through the trees. Usually I would be under fluorescent lights, arguing about pallet weights. Instead, I was drinking coffee and watching a cardinal land on my fence. My laptop was open on the patio table. A dashboard showed the real-time logistics flow of the company. Everything was green. The script was humming along, optimizing routes, saving the company thousands of dollars an hour. Every month, Vance Logistics Solutions would receive a wire transfer for $25,000. I had effectively retired at 47. I still worked, maybe 5 hours a week, tweaking the code, answering high-level questions for Marcus. But I owned my time. I owned my life. I took a sip of coffee and looked at the camera. You know, for 12 years I thought loyalty was a currency. I thought if I worked hard, stayed late, and fixed everyone's mistakes, the company would eventually pay me back with respect. I was wrong. The mistake I made wasn't working hard. The mistake was giving away my value for free. I let them believe that my extraordinary effort was just standard procedure. I let them think the system ran on magic instead of my sweat. If you're in a position where you are the go-to person, the one who knows where the bodies are buried, the one who fixes the things nobody else understands, you need to protect yourself. Here's the advice: document your worth. Don't just do the work, keep a record of it. If you build a tool, a template, or a process, put your name on it. Make sure they know it comes from you, not the ether. Read your contract, know exactly what they own and what you own. If you create something outside of your job description, that is your leverage. Don't hand it over just because someone with a fancy title asks for it. Never train your replacement without a guarantee. If they ask you to teach someone everything you know, that is the biggest red flag in the corporate world. It means they are preparing to cut you loose. I didn't want to burn the company down. I just wanted them to pay the electric bill for the light I was providing. And when they refused, well, I just flipped the switch. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. We have more stories coming about people taking back their power. See you in the next one.